All right. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad we're going to be able to do this over the next couple of days because this will, I think, really help us avoid having to reinvent wheels when someone else has already invented it. I was thinking about what we're doing and listening to everyone's talks, and I thought I do see some parallels in what we're doing. So that's great potential for collaboration, but also a lot of things that are complementary. So to quote Phil, rather than reinventing the wheel, maybe we can put our respective wheels together to make a bicycle or a car so we can go further together. I feel like I sound like a politician, but but anyway, I feel really excited to be here. And our project is called Mammal Web. And one of the original motivators for starting this project is that we were really inspired by the annual breeding bird surveys that happen in the UK, right? Every year they get thousands of volunteers across the country to go out to do these breeding bird surveys. It's insane the amount of data they've been able to collect over the past, many decades. And it's provides so much useful scientific information. Now, as part of these breeding bird surveys, those volunteers can also submit mammal data on an optional voluntary basis. Now that's really nice, but when it comes to bird surveys, they usually happen during the day and only during the breeding season. This is a little problematic because, as most of you probably know, most mammals are nocturnal and much more elusive than a lot of birds. So this has proven to be a challenge in mammal monitoring and has resulted in what I call black holes in survey effort in Great Britain. So a lot of the gray areas you see in this slide are places where there's very little, if any, systematic survey effort on mammal diversity and distribution. So one thing that has been done in the past is that the Mammal Society had developed this really cool mammal tracker app, right? So you can use your smartphone, install the app. When you see a wild mammal, you can report it back to the Mammal Society, and they have been able to use this to try to come up with a mammal atlas that they've published. It's really cool. One other thing they have tried is, of course, working with volunteers to set up camera traps. If I remember correctly, it's in the southeast of England. It's really fun. And of course, when it comes to camera traps, I usually like to think of it as being made out of 3 steps. The first one, of course, is someone has to go set up the camera trap, deploy the camera trap, and collect the photos. And then, of course, someone has to stare at the computer screen, classify all of the photos to produce the data with which you can do the ecological analysis on. Now, of course, when it comes to classification, Snapchat Serengeti is, the gold standard, amazing, project that Zooniverse and Ali has been able to put together, where they're able to crowdsource and so many of the classifications in such a short amount of time. ZSL has also done some work in this regard with Instant Wild. There's, of course, eMammal in the States. And we've just heard about the Team Network projects that have been happening. Now, we looked at all of these 3 steps and we asked, is there anything we can do to help take citizen science involvement in them to the next level, right? How do we, take it to a higher level of engagement? And that's how we came up with the idea of Mammal Web. It started as a collaboration between us at Durham University and those at the Durham Wildlife Trust, okay? Since about May of last year, we were able to attract about 50 local volunteers to set up camera traps for us in the northeast of England. This is one picture I always like to show people, which is just, taking the local area very close to where I live. So you can see how there's a pregnant deer in the picture. It's got a big belly, right? A couple of weeks later, we got a picture from the same camera of what appeared to be the same deer, but with a baby deer walking behind it. So this covers a lot of the fun part of citizen science. It got people excited. And it's particularly cool because people can say, hey, I got this picture of this deer, right behind my house. And I think that's a really critical point that I would like to get back to. When we get our volunteers, we always make sure that they come in for an initial engagement meeting, where we not only go through the fun part of looking at those pictures with them, but also the science behind camera trapping and how to do it in as a rigorous way as possible. So we will take them out for practical sessions where they get to practice how to set up camera traps. And most importantly, we ask all of our volunteers to very carefully record all of the metadata that goes with setting up a camera trap. This might sound very obvious to us ecologists, but is surprisingly often overlooked in a lot of volunteer camera trapping projects. So one example, as you can see in this picture, is that we asked them to write down the deployment times of the camera trap, which is obviously an important measure of your sampling effort. So with this, you can start to look at things much more than just presence, but maybe you can look at behavior, occupancy, distribution, temporal change, the list goes on. Now, another thing is that in addition to working with those community members, we are also establishing relationships with local schools. I was really lucky to get an outreach grant from the British Ecological Society to work with Belmont Community School, where the students actually came together to develop their own outreach activities centered around camera trapping and looking at those photos. They set up a booth at their local community fair where they got people to come over, look at camera traps, also look at the pool game that the BES provided, which is really fun, but that's another story. And also to try out the MammoWeb website, classify some pictures, and even volunteer to set up a camera trap. So over this time, people have set up camera traps in more than 120 sites across the northeast of England, cumulatively. Everyone who participates upload their pictures, to our MammoWeb website, which kind of has a Zooniverse-esque feel to it, where you click on buttons representing what you think is in a camera trap picture. You can also access it on your mobile device, on your tablet, and so on. So this information is a little out of date. It's 4 months after I got this data, but at the time, we have more than 70,000 photos uploaded. It feels like a tiny drop compared to the ocean of pictures that are on Snapchat and Serengeti. However, all of these pictures are collected by our local volunteers, and they have classified over 30,000 of those photos, and I'm fairly relieved to see that the classification has largely kept up with the influx of pictures. They've been able to identify over 25 different species in the region. And you're able to start seeing some basic ecological information, such as deer activity patterns at different times of day, because you can see that at night, you seem to get more pictures of deer to reflect their kind of diurnal behavior. A very practical result is that someone got this picture of a raccoon. So obviously it's an endangered species in England, and people were actually pretty upset over it. So because of the careful metadata recording that came with the picture, DEFRA was actually able to get involved, track down the raccoon, apprehend it, and now it's undergoing rehab in a local zoo. So I think that's a very practical result that came from the citizen science effort. Okay. Now onto some challenges, right? The first one that we're trying to tackle is that we also get a lot of blank pictures, false triggers, without any animals in it. However, this might be a problem because we really hope MammoWeb to be more of a stimulant rather than a hypnotic. So we hope to develop some way to automatically weed out these blank pictures so people can, go straight to the animals. I see some people nodding their heads, so I would love to talk to those of you who nod their heads about this. Okay, another challenge is that we need a lot more classifications per photo. Ollie talked a lot more about this today, so I will not repeat it. So the key is to get more pairs of eyeballs on each photo. The next challenge is that a lot of users don't come back, okay? So this graph shows you that after the first few weeks, a lot of users, they get bored and they don't come back to look at more pictures. So we kind of thought about all of these challenges, okay? And at least for me, it kind of all came back to this classical definition of citizen science, which is about how volunteers collect or process data as part of a scientific inquiry. Okay, this is a highly cited classical definition, as I would like to call it. Now, Helkley in 2013 did publish a paper, a really cool paper in 2013 about different levels of citizen science engagement. And I think that classical level of engagement is kind of like the level one, right? Citizens as sensors. Okay, they just collect stuff for the scientists. You can involve them, a lot more by getting them into some processing of the data, which is really cool. However, wouldn't it be even cooler if we can take it to the next level, where citizen scientists are involved in the problem definition, data collection, and its analysis? So, we were thinking about this, and we were very lucky to partner with the Smart Earth Network, which we will be hearing from, and a professional development firm called Montreal. And what we're trying to do is to include some interactive data visualizations into the website. Okay, so what this means is that it can look something like this. So this is just a draft, an idea of what we want to do, but basically any volunteer can log on and look at statistics on where they've set up their cameras, how many photos they have uploaded, where the animal sightings are. They can drag and drop stuff around, plot things across time and space so that they can ask and answer their own ecological questions. Now, another thing we're trying to do in collaboration with our partners, and I hope to talk to you more about, is that we hope that whatever comes out of this can become a federated and standardized open source infrastructure. What I mean by that is we can take the software stack, with the classification algorithms, photo management, upload, project management, all of that, right? Take that, combine it with the sampling protocol we have and documentation on how to do camera trap surveys, maybe even take a camera, an actual camera, and put all of that into, a wildlife box or something, okay? So it comes with everything you need to do camera trapping. Now, what people can do then is that they can get this box and deploy it in their local communities. It can be an NGO, a school, or just anyone who wants to do this. Now, because this is essentially a private instance, they can collect their own data with their own camera traps and do their own analysis because everything comes with the box. However, because this is a peer-to-peer federated system, if someone wants to look at things over greater temporal and spatial scales, they can take all of that data, pull it, and look at everything, kind of on a grand scale. Now, what we're doing is actually the opposite of taking over the world, because this actually emphasizes the importance of a smaller and local project. What we're doing right now, we have about 50 volunteers setting up camera traps near Durham. We actually don't want to expand too much beyond that. What we hope would happen is that someone else can take all of this and run their own thing, in wherever they're based. And we don't have to manage all of those volunteers, set up those computer websites, and buy all of those cameras, okay? It's just that once everything is done, we can pull it together if we want. This is also really important because I was just at the ESA meeting last week, and a lot of people told me about how there is actually some research about how you can actually increase user motivation if they're monitoring their local communities because they feel they have more of a stake in it, so they feel more motivated to classify their own pictures, and they're more excited to find out what's going on in their communities, and they'll be excited to share those results with other people. So what we hope is to create a platform that people can do this with. Now, it is so what I hope to get out of this is that, it's not going to be just people looking at cute pictures. It is very important, useful for science and policy and management. But more than that, I would just end by echoing one of Ali's points from earlier, which is something I really believe in. So when it comes to citizen science, I strongly believe that it is much more than citizens collecting data for scientists, but rather science helping everyone become better citizens. Because we live in a free and democratic society. And for it to function, it is crucial that we all have the scientific literacy and critical thinking skills to fully participate in it, not just the scientists. And I hope that what we do together now can help all of us take one little step towards making a more democratic society with science literacy. So that's all I have for you today, and I hope to hear your criticisms. Thank you.
Okay, hey everyone. So I work for Smart Earth Network, and I am just going to give you a brief overview of what we do and some of our projects and some of the solutions that we have been deploying in the field. You're all very aware of this, but there is a problem within conservation. The current species loss is 1,000 times the natural background rate. We know broadly about what the biggest threats are: climate change, habitat destruction, but isolating those threats to individual populations, monitoring populations on a global scale, identifying those hotspots of biodiversity and those areas most at risk is quite difficult. We don't have the data, we don't have the baseline data, and as has been mentioned, we don't have the data on the spatial and temporal scales needed to see what's really going on. Another thing, in addition to the data, is just lack of resources, and that is hampering the collection of the data and the decision making. So with this in mind, there is a tech revolution happening in other fields of society. The Internet of Things was mentioned briefly, and this is, if you're not aware, is the connection of millions of devices and sensors that can communicate with each other. This has been born out of the miniaturization of devices. Devices are becoming cheaper, they're longer lasting, and they can be used for so many different things now. It's estimated that there'll be 26 billion connected devices by 2020. And we can already see the effects of this happening in other areas of society. You may have seen the smart home thermostats that are around. This can automatically change temperature in your home through your mobile phone or just by sensing whether someone's in the house. And it's also being used in retail. RFID sensors are being used to map people's shopping habits. Smart traffic sensors are being used to create smarter flows in the cities, and you can use it to monitor nutrient levels of soil for agriculture. And we noticed that there's a tech revolution happening in other areas of society, but the uptake of technology within conservation, where it's needed most to collect data, is still quite slow. And so that's why CEN was set up. We are the connection between the conservationists and the ecologists that need the technology and the solutions developers, the technology developers, whether they're individuals or organizations. So how we work, we accept challenges from conservation scientists and ecologists, but anyone can pose a challenge. So they could say that they need something to be measured, they need a new technology to detect this population trend or to measure this habitat change. And we are almost a matchmaking organization, and we connect them to the developers and the organizations who are willing to find the solution to that problem. We then work to raise funds. This could be through applying for grants or through crowdfunding. And then hopefully the solution is then deployed into the field. If you go on our website, we have a solutions database under several categories, and it's being updated all the time. So it's there for conservationists to access for free if they need more information on a particular technology. And we have a meetup group where we organize hackathons and workshops around a problem, and we get the technology developers in, and then they thrash out a solution. So yeah, this is an example of some of our projects. We have about 12 projects at the moment. We're still like a young organization. We're only been going for less than a year now. And you can see the Mammal Web one, as Penn mentioned. We connected them to the technology developers at Montreal, who are now helping us develop the next stage of Mammal Web. But we have projects both in the UK and overseas, and some are small and some are large, and we accept any challenge, and we're working to find solutions for these. Our first project was around the dugongs in the Philippines. Now, dugongs are a threatened coastal marine mammal, and they're rarely seen at sea. And the scientists were having difficulty studying their population because they only surface to breathe once every few minutes. And they were using helicopters from the air to take photos of the little dugongs as they surfaced. And this was expensive and time-consuming and wasn't really working. So we got involved and we engaged the local people in their conservation. The only people who see dugongs are the fishermen on a regular basis. So we worked with a local NGO, C3, and we went out to the Philippines, and we, together with a mobile developer, developed a smartphone app to work on Android phones. We gave the fishermen these phones and this app and trained them on how to use it. And so how it works is the fishermen are out at sea, they see a dugong, the app allows them to take a photo of the dugong, and that photo is then time-stamped and geolocated, and the location of the dugong is mapped. And it's been a few months now, and we're starting to get a mapping of dugongs around this island on a scale that was impossible before with the old technology. And this app is free to download if you want to test it out. It's called WeLog, and this led to another project working in the UK. And this is an example of citizens coming up with challenges. So we were approached by the local wildlife crime officers, by the local police, who wanted a way to monitor wildlife crime in their area and report a wildlife crime reporting tool that anyone could use. And so this app was then adapted for that purpose. So we provided the app to local volunteers, and we trialled the app in the local area in London. And how it works is people see an incident, they see some pollution, they see someone harassing some wildlife, they take a photo, and that is geolocated and timestamped and goes straight to the police, who can then respond immediately. So this wasn't a conservation organisation who suggested the challenge. This was just citizens coming up with a challenge, and we found the solution. So these were these are small projects. These are quite localised projects. But the next step that we want to work on is developing a IoT-based platform solution to be deployed in protected areas. Protected areas, they cover 15% of the world's land surface. However, a study in 2010 showed that only 24% are soundly managed. There are many, many problems with protected areas. As I mentioned, there's inadequate funding, inadequate resources, and they don't have the technical equipment to monitor what's actually happening in those areas. They cannot prove that they are actually conserving biodiversity. Indeed, there's evidence to suggest that we are still losing species within protected areas. So they are not doing what they are supposed to do. And so we went out to a Pinjari National Park, which is in the northwest of Benin, and is part of a complex of protected areas. It's home to some of the last populations of West African lions and elephants, and is globally important for bird species. And so we met with, not me, unfortunately I didn't get to go, but we met with the local rangers and park staff and discussed the problems they were facing. There's a lot of poaching problems in the area, that they don't have the monitoring tools to isolate those incidents and before it's too late. Also, lots of habitat encroachment by pastoralists, and illegal deforestation as well is threatening the species. And this park receives very little funding. It's not a tourist hotspot at all, and it really doesn't have many resources. So we developed a diagnostic to see how technology can be implemented and improve a range of features of the park. And the proposed idea is to have the IoT-based devices deployed in the field. These are drones, these are camera traps, RFID devices, acoustic sensors. But they are all connected on a communications platform. And this means that data can be collected in real time and can be stored in one cloud-based platform. This is important because at the moment there are devices being deployed by different organizations, but they are not collaborating with each other. And so they just keep the data themselves, and this means we don't have the data at the right scale for analysis. An important thing to mention is that we want to incorporate a community platform as well. It's not just a collection of data that's important in parks, but it's the whole governance and decision-making process that is really crucial. This allows local stakeholders, local community members to have a say in and share information in their local area. We want to really empower the local staff to be able to use the data themselves and to share knowledge and to respond to threats really quickly. Also, we want to incorporate big data and analytics because at the moment it's very ad hoc analysis that's happening at the moment. And the device layer at the bottom is for the local staff to use, and this could be mobile phone apps and on the computer as well. So yeah, a lot of information here, but this is basically the summary of what we want to achieve in the protected area. The comms tools will streamline administration and decision-making and the governance of the park. The monitoring and evaluation will be improved by the remote sensor network and the analytics. And because of the greater amount of evidence we have, we will be able to achieve greater decision-making in developing effective policies. At the moment, we don't have the resources in terms of people or funds, so the technology will really help us get the most of the data for what we have, So how to get involved in what we do? We have a community that anyone can join, and this enables people to pose challenges, share information, pose technology solutions, and share best practice. If you have a solution or a challenge or an idea, email me and it can be added to the solutions database. And please join our meetup group. We have hackathons and workshops based around projects. And if you have a project or a challenge that you would like us to work on as a hackathon idea, please approach me as well. Yes, that's it.
Thanks, Ali. I know we all introduced ourselves, but seeing as it was way back before lunch, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Fiona, and I'm based here in Oxford, over in the Department of Zoology, although I actually have a direct link to one of the Zooniverse projects, as Ali just said, which is why I'm here today, and I'm going to be specifically talking about how we can effectively manage the conservation of seabirds on a really large scale. I don't think that I need to convince anybody in here of the importance of being able to effectively monitor the population of any vulnerable animal group, so I'm going to keep this bit quite brief, but just to provide some context to my research, this is a graph showing the population trend of the world's monitored seabirds over the second half of the 20th century, just into the 21st century. And as you can see, what we've got is this pretty marked worrying trend in the population over time. Now, obviously, as conservationists, what we ultimately want to be able to do is to address this trend in some way, and our aim is to really halt it. But we can't do this without having a really good understanding of what the underlying mechanisms are that are causing this trend, understanding specific threats so that we know where to specifically focus our conservation policy. Now, we can't also do this and really understand the mechanisms without having some really good monitoring networks in place. And as was covered in one of the earlier talks, we historically have had to sort of go physically. Biologists, researchers have had to go to, in this case, nesting sites, colonies, count the number of birds there, calculate things like nest survival rate, and they've had to do this in person on a repeated regular basis, which obviously isn't incredibly practical. You can, of course, extrapolate data to some extent, but this isn't going to be truly accurate all of the time. So what we really need is some sort of large-scale monitoring program, which, as I said, is what I'm going to be talking about. So this is really an excuse for a cute picture, but also to introduce the specific group of seabirds that I work on, which are, of course, the penguins. So what's to stop me, as a researcher working on penguins, from going down to Antarctica and counting all the penguins that I can all the time? And this may seem like a daft question, and that's because it is. It's completely unrealistic. But if this is what I want to do, basically monitor populations, then that's kind of the question I need to ask. And we can think, what are the main challenges that are standing in my way? So I've broken these down into two. The first of these is the remote and harsh environment that we have. So obviously, for penguins, we're dealing with locations like the Antarctic continent, but not just there itself. We've got penguins all around the Southern Ocean, in places like the Falkland Islands, South Georgia, and loads of tiny little islands that are really difficult to get to. Along with that, you have some really difficult environmental conditions to deal with. Just to hammer that point home, I've got a picture here. For those of you interested in any early polar exploration, this is Mawson's hut, taken in the early 20th century. And even though our technology has somewhat improved since then, it's really still a sort of scary place to work, and it won't be safe or practical to have scientists down in Antarctica all the time monitoring penguins. The second challenge is the sheer amount of data that we have to collect and analyze. So this is Tom, one of my supervisors on Zawodowski Island. Just for another bit of your general interest, this particular island made news headlines back in July when there was a big volcanic eruption from Mount Kori, and we don't quite know how bad the damage is yet because there haven't been any expeditions, so fingers crossed it's not too bad because all of these penguins are put at risk. But when you realize that each of these tiny little white dots in the background is a penguin and that it's basically our job to count them, then you begin to see the challenge that we face. So how do we get around these issues? And I'll take a look at them one at a time. So first of all, to get around the problem of working in a really remote, hostile environment, Penguin Lifelines, which is an organisation which was founded by Tom, my supervisor, who you just saw, and who I'm now associated with, has taken the novel approach of setting up a remote camera network around the Southern Ocean. And together with the Australian Antarctic Division, they now have about 140 remote cameras in place. Now these, unlike many of you, aren't time-lapse, capture cameras. They don't fire when an animal walks past. They're time-lapse cameras. So we can program them to take a photograph any minute, every hour, whatever, to give us the sort of data that we require. And this is really nice because it gives us an overview throughout the entire year of what the population is doing at any time. And I wouldn't normally include the make of camera that we use, but seeing as some of you might genuinely be interested, we use hyperfire trail cameras, which I think I noticed is what Penn had an image of in his talk. And these have been really reliable for us. So we literally go, and on our field work, we set up these cameras. You can see it's quite a simple design, really. You've got the Reconyx camera sitting at the top there, on top of a scaffold pole and a tripod, which is secured in a wire rock basket. And on our field work, we go replace the batteries, replace the SD card, so we can take out all the data we've got over the last year, do any maintenance work that needs doing, any damage that might have occurred during the Antarctic winter, and of course put up some new cameras so we begin to expand our network even more. So this is just a quick map to give you a bit of context, show where we have our cameras. So you can see all of the red dots there, right up into the Falkland Islands, South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, down onto the Antarctic Peninsula. And you can see that it's not just one species either that we're monitoring. We've got many different species that we're looking at. So this is one of the images that we might get out. I just plucked out one that looked quite nice. So as you can see, the image quality is nice, and you've critically got things like your date and timestamp, as well as some information like temperature, which also becomes really useful to us. Once you've got your individual images, then you can tag all of those together if you like, and that's quite nice to do for outreach. People prefer generally to look at a time lapse than just one image on its own, and the penguin should turn up. There they go. And this was just made by tagging together all of the images that were at 2 p.m, but obviously you could do them more frequently if you wanted. So that somewhat goes to solving our remote location issue. We just put the cameras down there, they do the job that the scientists would do. We only have to go down in one season, pick up all our data, and that's great. But we haven't really addressed the problem of having this massive data. In fact, all we've done is replace having to count millions of penguins to counting millions of pictures of penguins, which isn't ideal. So as I'm sure you've guessed, this is where citizen science and Zooniverse comes in. So together with Penguin Lifelines, there's been a collaboration with Zooniverse to produce Penguin Watch, which launched in September 2014, if I'm correct, and has been a brilliant success. So this is the interface of Penguin Watch. If any of you are looking for something to do at the weekend, it's penguinwatch.org. It's quite addictive. This is the interface that you'll be presented with. And when you click Get Started, you'll receive a short tutorial. So I'm quite envious actually about what Penn was doing, bringing in people and showing them what to do. I think that's really nice. Unfortunately, for the type of project we have, that's not possible, but a few slides seem to suffice. So you'll be given a few short instructions and then asked, are there any animals present in this image? To which you answer yes or no. If you do have animals in the image, then you're taken on to a next step, which is this. You'll have a list of adults, chicks, eggs, or other down the side. Click on one of them and then literally click on the penguins to tag them. In case you're wondering, other would be things like boats, tourists, which you sometimes see walking around, other seabirds. I've done this particular image, I've just done a few clicks to show you. I've done the adults in orange, the chicks in green, and it's really simple, which means it's great for anyone to do. We've had children, I think our youngest one was like 3 years old, and it's a really nice way to get people involved in a fairly simple project. After they've done that, they can have the option to talk about the image, which I'll come back to a bit later. As Ali was saying, all of the Zooniverse projects have a talk forum. So another thing about Zooniverse is that the images are shown to multiple users, and I think that's a really crucial thing. When you bring up the term citizen science, I think it often gets some criticism because people think, oh, you're giving images to a layperson, how on earth is that going to be as reliable as an expert? But by default, we have each image being shown to 10 different people, and that means that the reliability is boosted enormously. And as somebody else said, I can't remember, experts make mistakes too. So actually having this many people is really great. But how do we actually turn those clicks into data? Because I know that's what people would be interested in. As I just said, there are lots of people looking at each image, so what you need to do first is aggregate those results. So for each picture, you just have one data set saying, this is how many penguins are in the picture, and this is their coordinate data. So one of the Zooniverse team did a really nice clustering algorithm for us in Python, and don't ask me any more than that, but we get out a really nice data sheet which has image, click coordinate data, by which I literally mean what are the X and Y values for each of those clicks that we saw in the picture. And from that, we can then use a program. We use the R statistical programming software to literally draw out the number of clicks on each image. And by the time we have things like the number of adults and the number of chicks, that means that alongside the time data we have, we begin to build up a picture, a time series over time of when chicks are arriving, when adults are arriving, and all that sort of thing. I've purposefully kept these graphs quite crude. That's literally what you get out if you just grab the data out of the image. And the approach that we've taken is to set a threshold. So as we were saying, people might make mistakes. So we've decided that if more than half of people have said that that's a penguin, then that's most likely a penguin. And the way that the clustering algorithm specifically works is that if you've got one user clicking in more than one place, then that's 2 penguins. We just take that if there's 2 points, then that equals 2 penguins. So another thing that that citizen science can be useful for is computer vision. We're actually working with the computer vision team here in Oxford at the moment to come up with an algorithm to automatically detect penguins. And this isn't designed to replace the citizen science by any means. And I'm not just saying that. I think we'll always need Penguin Watch. But it's something nice that we can use in conjunction. And you know, I was saying that we can program the cameras to take photos every minute. Those particular images might get a bit boring for people in Penguin Watch, so maybe that's something that we could get the computer to do rather than them. But we're always going to need people to identify penguins. So again, I don't go into the nitty-gritty of the exact algorithms that they use, but this is something that's really exciting as well, and that I know a lot of citizen science has been used for. Ali just asked me quickly to talk about some of the public engagement that we do, because I know that's something else that has come up. I think the fact that we now have over 4 million classifications is testament to the fact that this is really popular. People really seem to like clicking on penguins, and they're just pretty charismatic. I can't particularly put my finger on it, but I don't think any of us expected it to be quite as popular as it is. I've introduced my friends to it, and they get quite addicted just clicking on it. I don't know, there's something about it. But of course, we need to keep people interested, so this comes in many different forms. One of the things that we can do is literally go out to people and do some outreach. So there's me at the Oxfordshire Wildlife Festival, obviously here in Oxford, down at the Museum of Natural History, and that was a really nice opportunity to talk to families. That's me showing somebody literally how to use Penguin Watch, but we also took along a big Antarctic coat and a sleeping bag, and people really liked trying those on and having a look at the cameras that we use and that sort of thing. We were also really lucky to have quite a bit of media attention earlier in the year. This is a still from the BBC News website. And what that particular article is talking about is one of our initiatives to get school groups involved. So I think Pen again was talking about getting young people involved in the project. And because Penguin Watch really is ultimately quite simple to do, it's a really good thing to get classrooms involved in. And the kind of response from this has been phenomenal. We've had teachers from all over the world, America, New Zealand, the UK, asking us what they can do. And basically we'll say, yeah, that's great, sign up with a username, and we'll send you loads of information about the colonies that you've been looking at. And sometimes it links into a project they've been doing about Antarctica or ecosystems, or just the fact that the teacher wants to expose them to some real life research and get people really interested in science, which is great. One of the other things that we've done is have a Penguin Watch competition. So this is the winner of the competition, which was done in conjunction with Quark Expeditions. So he got a lovely trip to Antarctica. To enter that, what he had to do was go on and classify 10 images in a day, and every time you do that, then you get an entry into the competition. Just as a bit of feedback from that was really great. It got loads more people involved. We had a massive spike in the people going on Penguin Watch and clicking. And from talking to Ali, that seems to be a lot more successful than literally saying the person who clicks on the most images wins. I think that can get a little out of hand, am I right? Okay, so I'll let Grant talk about that as well. One of the only con that I can think of is that some of the really hardcore penguin watchers who have been doing it since the beginning and do loads and loads of images thought, oh, you know, there's someone coming along who's only done 10 images and they've won a trip. But from our point of view, it was really great to get more people involved. So I guess you have to weigh up the options there. I can just say this really quickly because Ali's already said we have blogs associated with the Zooniverse projects, and this is the one associated with Penguin Lifelines, and of course the talk forum. So we have a really nice community on Penguin Watch. We have a team of really nice moderators that answer questions, and this isn't just for people that are having difficulty. They could see a really nice image. As I said, I'd come back to it. If you spot something in an image, you've got the opportunity to press on a button that says talk about this. So you might want to flag up something that you find a bit confusing or exciting, and then other people can look at it too, which is really great. And last of all, something that's hopefully coming up within the next month is a data portal. So it's all good, sort of having over 37,000 registered users, but you need to keep those people engaged. And we don't really want people clicking on pictures of penguins for 6 months and thinking that their data's just going into a void. What's really happening with it? What is this research? So this might be something that people will take sort of 10 days classifying, and then a link will pop up to this, and they can see the locations of where they've been clicking. They can look at a bit of time-lapse video, the research we're doing, and that should hopefully keep them engaged. And I think that's everything that I had to say. I have lots of people to thank, as you can see, the people who take us on fieldwork, but also lots of different institutions. And I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so as I said earlier, my name's Rory. I work in Kate Jones's group at UCL on Bat Detective. And yeah, as Ali was just saying, it's an audio project, which kind of, I suppose, distinguishes it a little bit from a lot of the camera trap related projects. I think there are a lot of similarities in terms of the challenges that are faced, but there are also some audio-specific ones, which I'll cover a little bit today. So I guess I'll talk a bit about acoustic monitoring in general for ecology and citizen science. I'll talk a bit about the Bat Detective project, the results we've been getting, and then about some of the use cases, so where we've actually been testing the kind of tools we've been developing. So the objective of the Bat Detective project is to develop automated tools to find bat calls in these huge volumes of survey audio. So first of all, just to say that when I say we, I actually mean all of these people, all of these funders, all of these organizations. So I've been working on the project for about a year, but it's been spearheaded by Kate Jones and it's been running for about 10 years. So I'm really just the messenger for a lot of this research. So thanks to everyone who's been working on this. So first of all, so there's a lot of interest building in the use of acoustic sensors to monitor wildlife because of they're potentially such a great source of ecological information. So as well as information about presence and abundance of vocalizing animals, there's also what they're doing and when they're doing it, so aspects of behavior and phonology. So I just wanted to play a couple of short clips to kind of get going, if this comes through. No, it's coming off my computer, I have to imagine it. So this is a pipistrelle bat echolocating and social calling, which you can't hear, so it's almost by the by, really. But hey? Yeah, it's an audio, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. That kind of thing. So basically, this was about, there's two different acoustic behaviors going on in this recording, so you're already starting to get in touch with more than one aspect of what's going on here. And the bottom one's a flock of swifts. But both of these recordings were made in the allotments behind my house, just with an acoustic sensor I put out there, which I think is quite a nice example of where citizen scientists can get involved in actually collecting data using these sensors. You put them out, you start collecting data about what's around you. But there's a couple of sort of key challenges that have really emerged. So first is the cost of sensors. So these sort of state-of-the-art, a bit like these wildlife acoustics ones up in the top right corner, clock in at well over 1,000, sometimes 2,000 and more pounds. And also the volume of data, as with the camera trap images, you're just producing so much data that it becomes really difficult to analyze by hand. So I'm going to talk about bats, because that's what we work on. But I think, again, a lot of the challenges here are more broadly applicable to acoustic monitoring more generally. So Bat Detective is a sort of a citizen science project nested within a citizen science project, if you like. So the IBATS program was set up in 2006 as a way of putting into place the sort of survey networks for global acoustic bat monitoring. So it started in Eastern Europe, so you can see the coverage on the map on the left here. And then it's expanded over the last 10 years to 22 countries. So this is thousands of volunteers go out, drive a transect in a car with an ultrasonic detector on the top, and they collect acoustic transect data, GPS data, other metadata, and they submit that to us for analysis. So what we've got is an amazing database of 10 years worth of acoustic data and an absolute nightmare to try and analyze it. So the question that Bat Detective was set up to ask was, okay, how do we do that? So there's a kind of a standardized pipeline you would go through to go from this raw survey data to species classification, what's there. So first of all, there's this first stage of detecting the calls. You have to find where in the actual audio the call of interest is, which isn't a trivial problem. And then you have to classify it to species. So that historically, this has often been done by extracting some parameters from the call describing certain aspects of its shape. So there are commercial softwares available to do this, but as I think somebody mentioned earlier, a lot of the time they're kind of black boxes, they're proprietary, and a lot of the workings are hidden under the hood. So for the purposes of science, it's really important to have transparent tools. And secondly, a lot of them aren't really very good at processing large volumes of data, and the amount of data we have requires tools that are good for that. So the idea with Bat Detective then was to develop a detector, this first step. So to train machine learning algorithms to recognize bat calls in an audio data. But to do that, you need a very large data set of labeled calls, like what do bat calls look like to train the algorithms on, which is where Bat Detective came in. So this was started in 2012 as a means of asking for the Zooniverse community to get involved in finding bat calls in all of this audio. So it started off with data from Eastern Europe uploaded, but in the last year, since I joined, actually, we've had a spike in activity, which has been really nice because we've been uploading data from around the globe. So places where IBATS data has been recorded that wasn't in the initial Eastern Europe lot, which also increases the diversity of the data that's going into the detector. So I would play these, but you won't be able to hear them. But so when people go onto the Bat Detective website, they're shown a short clip, which may or may not have a bat in it, like this or like that, and then they're asked to tell us what they hear. So whether it's a bat, and in which case what kind of calls they think it is, so searching, social, or feeding, whether there's any insects, and whether there's any mechanical noise. So yeah, we've had a sort of a great deal of input, I suppose. We've had over 5,000 users by May this year, and this included a partnership with British Science Week, where we had 100,000 new classifications in a week, which is amazing. And we did a load of sort of promotional activity around that, which was fantastic. So we've had over 110 hours worth of unique audio classified, well, detected, if you like, with over 11,000 search phase echolocation calls, which is this great set then that we can use to train the detector. So just to talk a bit about the results we've been getting then. So this is the call detection training. So Oshin, who's been doing all the work on this, has been using a form of deep learning called a convolutional neural network. So the advantage of this over a lot of other earlier machine learning methods is that rather than extracting parameters from the calls, which can be really difficult when you've got noisy data, you just pass them the raw spectrogram data directly and they learn the discriminating features automatically. So this bypasses some of this challenge of noise that you would get in a lot of ecological survey data. So this graph up here shows the calls on the spectrogram, and then above is the algorithm predicted probability of detection. So when it goes over a threshold, a detection is marked. So these calls have been found, and it even picks up this quiet one right in the background between the first two calls. And I'm going to skip over this bottom one slightly, but the take home from this is that the more training data you add, pushes the precision recall curve up into this top right corner, which essentially improves the accuracy. And we've been finding that it's really significantly been outperforming the commercial softwares we were previously using at detection. Sonobat would often miss up to 80% of the calls that we're picking up, the noisier ones that are harder to parameterize. So these results then, this detector we've got, fits into this pipeline in this first step here. So we now have a detector that can pick calls out. And we have published open source classifiers as well. The idea is to build a full pipeline. But the two classifiers we've published both currently rely on parameters being extracted by proprietary software. So currently what we're working on is a convolutional neural network-based classifier that can essentially daisy chain with the detector to produce a really quick detector classifier. And we're testing that at the moment. And also we've got this really great data set from Bat Detective. So not only have the echolocation calls been labeled, but we've also got social and feeding calls. So one of the interesting things here is, can we train algorithms to start picking up aspects of acoustic behavior? So rather than just, are the bats there, what are the bats doing? So this is a good data set to start thinking about that with. So I wanted to dwell for a minute then on some of the challenges and lessons we've got from this process. So one of the things that we kind of knew when we went into it was that, especially with audio data, and this is quite audio specific, I think, detection, so detecting whether the call is there, whether it's interesting, if it's a bat, is often an easier task than classifying it to species with audio data, which is often a lot more unfamiliar than, say, visual data for a user. So we asked people to detect the calls, which is a kind of a nice task that people can get involved in, but even experts struggle to identify bat species from their calls. So identifying species would be a difficult step to include in this. That said, there's still quite a steep learning curve with audio data in general, so it takes a while to learn what a bat sounds like. This is ultrasonic data, it's slowed down so we can hear it, it's not something we're familiar with. So there is this question that's still hanging over us of how to account for this variability in user experience. So far, the way that we've been getting around it with sort of working through training the detector as it stands has been to only use data that's been labeled by volunteers that are active above a certain threshold, if you like. So people that have already gone over that threshold, you think they might have classified a couple of hundred calls, they probably know what a bat call sounds like by now. But we're really interested now in exploring how to use the rest, especially given that we had this amazing spike in activity during Science Week, and a lot of people probably haven't labeled hundreds of calls. So there's still a lot there that we'd like to incorporate. So it's been interesting to hear, especially Ali's talk earlier about this. And lastly, yeah, so any biases that are in your training data are going to come out in your detector. So our data was recorded near roads, so certain species are found closer to roads than others. So the idea then to try and improve this is to augment this with some of this world tour data I was talking about, and also from other call databases as necessary. So lastly then, I just wanted to talk about applications for a moment. So what are we actually doing with it now? We've got these sort of prototype tools, if you like. So firstly, the whole point was to develop something we could analyze the IBATS data with, this massive database. So this is just an example of kind of what you can do. So this up in the top left is transects recorded in Jersey from 2011 to 2015, and they're by car, and obviously because the island's so small, the coverage is quite incredible. So they were recorded twice a year. And so the pipeline then fits from going from this like raw GPS and audio data to the map below, which is geolocated bat passes classified to species. So over the course of several years, you can then start to model the population trends, as with here. So this was a sort of a small example that was done for a report earlier in the year, but we've got a lot more data from Eastern Europe to start analysing with these tools now. And lastly then, so this was all about the problem of data glut, if you like. How do you deal with the massive quantity of data that you have? But another challenge I mentioned at the start in terms of citizen science is cost of sensors. So how on earth can you scale this up to get more people involved in acoustic monitoring if sensors cost thousands of pounds? So some collaborators of our group, this is Alex Rogers' group here at Oxford in computer science, have been working on this, which we've been playing around with a bit in the last few weeks. So it's called a sound trap, and it's an acoustic logger that's kind of been inspired by online maker communities and the availability of things like Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. You know, how can we kind of start to build tools that people can use? So this is open source. They're planning to share the schematics for this later in the year, I believe, and it costs less than £10 to produce, and it's much smaller than a credit card. And all you do is you put it in a plastic bag and you zip tie it to something in the landscape, in your garden. So these were in my allotment, the ones that I was talking about from those recordings. And these were originally designed for the New Forest Cicada project, which Alex's group's been working on for a while, which was recording in audible range mostly rather than ultrasonic. But actually they've been working on them to develop them for bat logging as well. And so full spectrum bat detectors are hugely expensive. They've been hugely expensive for quite a long time. But this is an example of the kind of full spectrum recordings you can get from this £10 logger. So these, I think, are long-eared bat calls. And again, I would play it. I'll try playing it with the microphone and see if you get anything. No, maybe not. But you can kind of see that the data is a bit noisier than some of the earlier ones I was showing you. There's a bit more processing noise going on in the background. So one of the, I suppose, advantages of training the bat detective algorithms on this noisy data set that we have is that actually they're quite robust to this. So we've been finding that they've been doing really well at picking out bat calls from this sort of background hum, if you like. So these at the moment were set, while I was using them, they were set to record 1 second in every 5 seconds for 3 hours a night. And that, over the course of a week, produced something in the order of 15,000 files. And they're all 1 second long. So looking at each one of those is already prohibitive, and that's 1 week of recording from a single detector in my garden. So the detector algorithms just running on them, I think, cut that number down to about 2,000, a lot of which are still false positives, but it's a start. So it's really interesting to think how these sorts of new loggers and the sort of tools that we've been working on could potentially work together to offer opportunities to scale up. And with that in mind, we currently have a collaborator, Diogo, who is in UCL with us for a couple of weeks training up. He's attempting a slightly insane whole Madeira bat survey at the moment, basically putting out sound traps and SM2s, which are these sort of state-of-the-art ones, in some places alongside them, to try and cover a massive stratified sample, the whole of Madeira, to survey the 3 bat species that are there, and to test out the automated detector classifier. So the idea is, okay, so can we now test these tools and see where the gaps in the pipeline are for doing something at this kind of scale, and whether something at this kind of scale is possible for citizen science in general. So yeah, that's me, and thanks very much to everybody that's done this work. I'm really more the mouthpiece than anything. And yeah, thanks very much to the Bat Detective and IBATS volunteers who collected and annotated all the data.
I like to do lively presentations. I always seem to get asked to do the last presentation in a day. So I've over the years I've learned to try and like pick people up, because by this point you're just like, can we just go to the pub? Or I'm like that anyway. So yeah, please go easy on me with your questions at the end, because as Ali said, I am not an ecologist like you guys. I'm an astrophysicist. So there was possibly lots and lots of ecological data in the images I used to look at. We just couldn't see any of it, but that's for down the road. Ali really wanted me to talk to you about our crowd at the Zooniverse. Who are they? What are their motivations? Really, I think from an angle, or at least I took it this way, of talking to you guys and saying, if you are going to run a citizen science project, what do you have to consider? What do you have to think about as far as the volunteers that are helping you out? We have a lot of volunteers, so we have some expertise. And one thing like to do over the years at the Zooniverse is play around, but not really playing, but making experiments to actually change things and check, and how does that affect what the crowd do? How can we increase their efficiency? How can we get them more excited about a project? And what do they actually want? Let's ask them. So I'm going to go through stuff like that. And please feel free to put up your hand and shout out a question while I'm talking. Ali quickly went over this, but this is the map of our crowd. We've got 1.5 million registered volunteers on the Zooniverse platform, but you don't have to register to classify in a project. You can go straight in to any Zooniverse project and start clicking in and submitting scientific classifications without registering your email and password. But if you do, you can get things like stats and emails from me reminding you to come back and help us out. And there's 1.5 million people who have registered that way in 237 countries according to Google Analytics. This map is actually our Google Analytics traffic from the last year, which covers pretty much every single country in the world, obviously heavily weighted towards the USA and Western Europe and other English-speaking countries, but we even had 4 people from North Korea on the Zooniverse in the last year. I don't know who they were, but they must be high-ranking officials, so kind of worrying, but they're probably on Penguin Watch, you know? Or maybe Bat Detective, Rory, they might be on Bat Detective. These are the ages.
Just very briefly,
Yes.
just ask, so I'm kind of guessing that what you're going to present from here on in is about registered users.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you have a sense of what proportion of the input from the crowd for all your projects comes from registered versus unregistered.
I couldn't tell you an exact one for the whole Zooniverse, but we've measured it on some projects, and it looks like actually, you know, you're talking towards the level of 80% kind of from registered users. But on most of our projects, once you've submitted 5 classifications as a non-registered user, which I didn't say, you're prompted to, we tell you, hey, if you're going to stick around with us, you might as well register an account, you'll get these benefits. You can't take part in the talk forums if you're not logged in as well. So quite a large fraction of the total classifications come from registered users. So this is, most of what I'm going to show you in the start of this slide is based on a survey. We actually asked thousands of our volunteers questions about themselves, because we don't actually ask them anything when they log in. So we asked them about their ages. They have roughly the same age breakdown as the general internet, peaking in the 20s and 30s and 40s. But interestingly, we have quite a long tail out to the end. Now, this might be obvious to a lot of you, but volunteers, quite a lot of them are retirees. People who've finished working in their older age and they want to contribute to something. So we have quite a large fraction of retirees taking part in the Zooniverse. This is one of my favorite graphs to look at, which is about the education, because it shows you that a large fraction of Zooniverse volunteers are educated past the level of obtaining a degree from university. More than 50% have that, and a large percentage even have masters and doctoral degrees. But around about a third, or quarter to a third on this plot, are people who've never even completed a university degree. And they're on these projects contributing to cutting edge science, conversing with leading minds in the field. And they even if they did go to university, it might not have been in that field. And a lot of these people don't have that level of knowledge at all, and they're coming on and they're helping facilitate cutting edge research, which is kind of an amazing thing to stand back and think about. Their employment is also very telling. A lot of people are retired, as I said before. There's a few students on there. There's a few people who are unemployed, but a large fraction of them are full-time employed. People taking part in volunteering have lives. I know this sounds silly. I'm actually going to have a word cloud up in a second, because Ali put a word cloud in, so I thought I should probably put one into solidarity. We're bringing the word clouds back. But yeah, their life, they have lives. They have families, they've got friends, they've got social lives, they've got work. You have to think about that when you're designing a citizen science project and you want people to take part in it. You have to think about the lives of other people, because your life might be waking up and eating, breathing your research, but it might not be that for them, and it probably isn't, but they still want to help you out. So how do you design a project in the best way to help them out? And seen here, you can see what that relates to when do they classify. They don't do it like scheduled work. They do it when they can. They basically, whenever they can get on, they'll do it. It's not regimented. And a lot of them say they would like to do more, but just life gets in the way. Also, a lot of people actually forget that it exists. I don't know, many of you have probably, the example that comes back to me is Code Academy. Quite often I'm thinking, when I've done all my emails, or for some reason I've had a quiet period in work and I'm getting a lot of work done and I've got some free time and I'm like, oh, you should learn Python. I'll go on Code Academy and start doing basic Python stuff, and then I'll be like, oh, that's very exciting, and then my work will get in the way again, and I forget that I even did it. But Brian from Code Academy, I think he is, sends me an email that says, hey, remember you started this course? That's actually a really important thing, to remind your volunteers that your project exists and you still need the help, because the reason they joined in the first place is because you needed the help, and to remind them that you still exist and need the help is very important. Here's the word cloud. We asked people why they stopped classifying on the Zooniverse. Some of them are just bored, but a lot of them it's about either stuff getting in the way or forgetting that we exist because other stuff happens in their life. So, like Brian at Code Academy, we decided to do a very basic experiment. Email reminders. It seems so obvious, but just track someone's activity on the project and then email them when they've not been on for a month or a week. We tried both. And it turns out, this is in a published paper by Segal et al., and it turns out if you email people and remind them they exist, they come back. Now, there's actually another graph. I'm cutting out a lot of this information because we've done so many different experiments, and I'll talk to you in the pub for hours and tonight through dinner if you want. But I'm missing out a graph here that shows that the people who came back after the email reminder actually did more classifications than they did the first time they classified on the project, which is really interesting. Reminding them that you still need help and asking them personally to come back seem to have even more of an effect than them just stumbling across the project. Yeah, so these are the return rates from people that were actually emailed, or the return rates from people who just classified and then came back. Only 6.7% of people actually come back without being told about a project. There's a huge drop-off, as was shown earlier, in all volunteering, especially citizen science projects. Yeah. Why do they take part? And Ali showed this earlier, but it's one of the most significant results of any survey we've ever done at Zooniverse. They told us overwhelmingly that they contribute because, they take part because they're contributing to scientific progress and because they're interested in the subject matter. Only 50% of them actually, or just over 50% of them actually said that they find it entertaining. Maybe that's because we don't build good websites, but no. But a lot of them actually see, when you look at the qualitative answers to this survey, a lot of them see it as work. They frame it as work, not as play in their head. It's not an exciting thing to go on. Sometimes it is penguin watch, oh my God, I'm going to go play and count penguins. But a lot of people are actually going on citizen science projects and volunteering in your projects because they want to contribute to the work. It's nothing to do with enjoying themselves that much. Yes?
Social interaction is often put forward as a motivation. Was that in the other category, or was it not a question that was asked?
It wasn't asked there. It is in the survey, which I can share with you afterwards. We ask people about, especially when we get to the talk forum, what do you use it for? And actually, talk is not used as a social network. People don't use it for that. They use it to get answers or to show stuff that they've found. And we work with a group who study social networks, and they've actually studied our discussion networks and shown that they're actually characteristically different from a social network. So there's not a lot of socializing happens in the Zooniverse, though that is partly by design on our side. And we've thought more about how could we make it more social? Does making it social help the efficiency of the project? And it might do. Gamification. I just wanted to put this in quickly. It's a huge topic, and we can have arguments about this, but at the Zooniverse, we don't go for gamification. We have twice in the past, twice or three times. The original Galaxy Zoo had a leaderboard. Leaderboards are extremely detrimental to citizen science projects if you want quality out of your data. People just click anything to get to the top of the leaderboard, and then people who are not on the leaderboard leave the project, and people who get to the top of the leaderboard leave the project. If you frame it as a game, you have to be very careful what you're doing because you're changing the entire nature of what you're getting people to do and the project. It's an ongoing scientific effort, not a game with levels, and it's very hard to build a good citizen science game. We tried a little bit of gamification with Old Weather, our project that Ali talked about earlier, people going through ancient ship's logs, and found that we said you could progress up through the levels of rank on a ship by how many classifications you've done. And just as I said, there's a paper published about the results. As many people were incentivized by it as were put off. They left the platform because they couldn't become the captain. Someone was doing a lot more than them. And they forgot that their contributions that they were still giving actually mattered. They were like, well, if I'm not doing as much as this person, I'm no use in this project, so they left. And the people who were at the top and were captain gave up because they completed the game. So people disappeared off the project for multiple reasons. We asked about what would make you take part more in the Zooniverse. The really interesting ones here, just to back up the gamification thing, competition with other participants. A lot of people actually said it would decrease their participation. Most people seemed not that bothered by it. The real big ones that people want in citizen science on Zooniverse projects is ways to track their own progress. How are you doing? How much are you contributing? People want to know how much time they've spent on the platform, how many classifications they made. They want to know when projects need help. They want reminders that they absolutely want to be told this is exactly where you're needed. And they want engagement with the scientists. One of the things they love on Zooniverse projects is to be able to go into this project and talk to a leading mind in the field, one-on-one, about the research. Also, ways to help each other. So there is a social aspect to be tapped into there that we're not doing, because at the moment we actually silo our classifiers while they're making their decisions and only allow them to talk after they've classified an image. And we thought maybe we should try building a project where people can collaboratively classify the same image. We've not tried it yet, but that's an experiment we've got planned for the future. So it's good to talk. Our projects all come with a discussion area, as Ali showed earlier, called Talk, where you can make comments on the images that you've seen and talk to the scientists. Flourishing projects have researchers on there answering people's questions and advanced volunteers who become moderators who can also answer the questions of new people on the platform. And projects where the researchers don't go on talk and they don't talk to their volunteers and they don't care about them or their questions tend to die and dry up, and volunteers stop taking part. If you don't love your volunteers and talk to them and take care of them, they'll leave your project. This is Talk, this is the structure of it. I'm sure you can tell that. Each dot here is a volunteer that we have who's commented on one of the discussion forums. The size of the dot is how many comments they've made. So you can see in the middle, there are a core group of people who make a lot of comments. These are mostly our moderators. The big green blob is a fantastic woman by the name of Elizabeth, who lives in Belgium. Yeah. So the color is related to which project they talk most on. Green being Galaxy Zoo, yellow being Snapshot Serengeti up in the top right there. But this structure is very much people only making one or two comments and asking a moderator about something. They're also connected by edges. If they've commented on the same subject. And Elizabeth, basically that whole green hue you can see in the background there, that's her talking to people who've only made one comment and helping them out basically on Galaxy Zoo or one of the other astronomy projects that she's an expert on. Yes?
Has she got an academic background?
Actually, she doesn't. She is an accountant, I think. She's going to kill me for not remembering actually where she works. She either works in a bank or as an accountant. And she got into Galaxy Zoo when it launched in 2007. And there was actually a core group on the Galaxy Zoo forum who got together and started socializing and creating meetups. And they're still friends, and they're still like a lot of her top level moderators. So they did form a social aspect. But yeah, she's not a scientist by training. She's learned a lot of astronomy, actually almost by osmosis, I think, how many classifications you've done. So we tried, I'm going to just finish up on a few experiments that we tried out. One being disengagement. Why do people leave the site? We've got a few ideas. They're bored, or they forget, or they don't realize that they're helping, or they're worried that they're doing it wrong. So we formed an experiment on Galaxy Zoo where a pop-up would come up after you complete a classification just asking you to stay. in various ways. And here are really the three messages. They're not that exciting. These were written by an external researcher, but please don't go. You've been extremely helpful, basically saying, like, we need your help. We need you to keep doing this to get the science done. The second one, addressing the fact that there was a social aspect to it. There was other people in the world taking part, thousands of them taking part in the same project. And the final one was kind of to address the fear of doing it wrong. We see this fear quite strongly on projects like we did with Cancer Research UK, where people are going through people's cancer data. You know, there's a fear that, and we don't always advertise exactly how, you know, the data processing works in the background, so people might worry that as soon as they've submitted a classification, it is canon and it's going to be used, but that's not the case, so we're trying to reassure people of that. The winner by far was asking people to stay because they were helping, and this is the number of classifications that they did, and just definitely the first message kept them going, and way beyond what they got if they didn't see any message at all. We also tried language. This seems really menial and stupid, but if you build a Zooniverse project now as a researcher, you can go and do that, and we'll hear all about that tomorrow, and we'll actually try building some. You get a big tagline. The Zooniverse design is very empty. You get to put a big tagline in the middle. Sit and think about that for at least 5 minutes, because it makes a huge difference what you write there. That is the call to action. That's the first thing people see when they're looking at your project. If you've got any sort of citizen science project and you want to get people involved, think about the call to action. It's really important. We had one for Planet Hunters, which was, with your help, we're looking for planets around other stars. That sounds great. But we thought, well, maybe it could be better. I wonder if language changes it. So the three I came up with were discover a planet today. That's like that. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Help us find new planets is the call to help researchers. And we're hunting for planets around distant stars. Get involved now. That's kind of boring. And the amount of clicks through into the project was massively higher for help us find planets now. The help aspect. Discovering a planet was cool, people were into that, but actually helping people discover a planet was more cool. And this is the cumulative time they actually spent on the site afterwards, showing a lot more than they got from the tagline that was there before. We actually created an extra, it was something like an extra year's worth of effort in a few days just by changing the tagline. So think about your messaging when you're making a project like this. We tried one with plankton as well. The one we have on the site, and it's still there, no plankton means no life in the ocean, is nothing. It's a sentence, but it's not a call to action. Help scientists measure the health of the ocean. Yes, that works. Okay, this is the home run, like the home straight. We'll be in the pub within the next 10 or 15 minutes. Does the nature of your data matter? Now, Penyan, you're going to be especially interested in what happens here. So, not all projects are born equal. Fiona has Penguin Watch. Everyone loves penguins, and they've got images of penguins. Rory has Bat Detective. It's audio data, so it's different. It's harder to do. And you're looking at frequency spectra. The key to getting around that is to frame the problem. Say exactly why you need people's help, and give them a great call to action that shows you're going to do something with their clicks. With that, you can take boring data and turn it into one of the most successful citizen science projects in the world. And Planet Hunters, for example, has graphs. It's just graphs, but it's the second most popular citizen science project on the Zooniverse platform now that Penguin Watch has taken over. So the nature of your data does matter in more ways than one. Snapshot Serengeti has amazing data, and you guys are ecologists. You've got some great data. As far as citizen science goes, astrophysicists and ecologists have the lucky hands, right? We can get some amazing images and great data that people are interested in innately. Sorry, Ali's already used this one, so I'll use another interesting image from Snapshot Serengeti. I told you I would get a Jurassic Park reference into my talk. I think you owe me a pint. But the problem is they're not all like this in Snapshot Serengeti. In fact, 2/3 of them look like this. They're empty. Well, they're not empty. They've got a lot of habitat there, but there's no mammals. There's no mammals in this image. And 2/3 of the images in Snapshot Serengeti have no mammals. So what you really want to do is train computer algorithms to detect these and get rid of them. Just give people the good images. That will keep them incentivized. That will keep them on the project. You just want to show them images like this. that'll absolutely inspire their imagination, and they'll just stay classifying for years, right? Wrong. And we were surprised too. We built an experiment to put in and give different cohorts great images on Snapshot Serengeti when they started classifying, fantastic images. And we couldn't figure out why these people weren't staying as long. And the only thing that we built a bunch of different cohorts, and none of them were staying as long as the people on the control cohort on the standard Snapshot Serengeti. And the difference in the data set is that we'd removed all the blanks. We'd hand selected 100 images and put them in with no blanks. So then we had a look, as like, are the blanks affecting the data? They probably are, they're probably affecting behavior. So then we built an experiment where we gave people proportions of blanks. When you went on Snapshot Serengeti, you either got no blank images at all, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%. We didn't put 100% in because Ali said that might kill our project. So there was no 100% cohort of people just seeing no animals, no matter how many they classified. But we tried up to 80% and found, actually, that the people who had more blank images were doing more classifications and staying longer on the site, which is a bizarre result until you start thinking about it psychologically a little bit. We see in the qualitative answers to the survey, when we ask people what keeps you classifying on a Zooniverse project, many of them answering things like, I love the thrill of the hunt, going and going and going until you find that one picture that you've been waiting for. Finding that one diamond in the rough seems to actually really drive people. So you do want to process your data set properly, but there's things that seem like big wins that actually might not be. And delivering a good kind of cadence to images on a citizen science project is very important. You don't want to give people all these fantastic images because actually one thing is that they find them very hard to go through. If you show them that zebra picture, there's 17 zebra and 50 wildebeest in that image. It's a beautiful image, but if you're actually going to go through it, it'll take you about half an hour to classify it. Whereas you can go through a blank image, you've contributed to science, you've gotten rid of an image, you've done a classification, you get the same gratification. So that was an interesting result that I just wanted to finish on. And sorry for shooting you down, Ben, but actually making sure you give people all the amazing images isn't always the best way about showing people data. Making sure you give your volunteers respect and genuine data. Don't try and hide it behind a game. Tell them why you need them. Tell them the results you're going to produce. Get them involved. Don't put a cutoff on how they get involved. We've had volunteers become moderators. We've even had 2 volunteers become paid members of scientific research teams because they did so much work for them. Just absolutely treat them with love, and you'll get a more efficient citizen science project, and you'll get a happier crowd, and you'll get more science done. Thank you.